When I first met Daniel, he was charming, ambitious, and struggling, the kind of man who made you want to believe in his dreams. I was doing well back then, running my own small design business, with enough savings to feel secure. He told me he wanted to start a logistics company, and I wanted to support him, not just emotionally, but financially. At first, it was just small things, paying for his car repairs, helping him with rent, buying him a new laptop, for work. But then, last year, he told me about a rare investment opportunity, a foreclosed property he could buy cheap and flip for double the price. I was skeptical, but he looked me in the eyes and said, "This is for us. Our future." He needed $120,000 to close the deal. I transferred it all, my entire savings, into his account. I even told him I didn't need my name on the title yet, I trusted him. For months, he told me the renovations were going well. He'd send photos of paint samples, tiles, and even a new fence being built. I believed him, but something started to feel off. He stopped answering calls in the evenings, claiming he was too busy. His business trips became more frequent. And when I asked to see the house in person, he always had an excuse: contractors are working, there's mold, the neighborhood's not safe yet. Then, last week, by pure accident, I found the address through a mutual friend. It wasn't listed under any company name. It was under his. I drove there. When I pulled up in front of the house, I froze. The yard was freshly landscaped, the porch lights were on, and through the living room window, I saw Daniel, laughing. Not alone. His wife was beside him, holding a glass of wine. And next to her sat his mother-in-law, rocking a small baby. My stomach twisted. My vision blurred. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, unable to breathe. That house, my house, the one I paid for, was now their family home. I didn't confront him that night. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to myself. Greater than, you bought a house with my money, and your wife and mother-in-law are going to live in it. Then that night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, smiling, carefree, holding his so-called wife like he'd never lied to a soul in his life. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me. By morning, anger replaced the shock. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wanted answers. I started digging. First, I checked the property records. The deed was indeed under his name, Daniel R. Morris. Purchased 8 months ago. Paid in full. The date matched the same week I'd wired him my money. There it was, in black and white. Then I found something else. The co-owner listed on the insurance was a woman named Clara Jenkins Morris. His wife. He'd been married the whole time. Every late meeting, every business trip, every time he said he was visiting his sick mother, all lies. The more I uncovered, the more the puzzle pieces rearranged into something sinister. Clara wasn't just some innocent woman. She owned a real estate staging company. The same company Daniel claimed was helping him renovate. They'd played me. Together. I called his number, twice, 3 times, no answer. Finally, I sent him a message. Greater than, I know everything. You have until tonight to call me, or I'm coming over. He replied 2 hours later. Greater than Daniel, you're overreacting. Don't do anything stupid. We'll talk when things calm down. Me, calm down. You stole my life savings. Daniel, it wasn't like that. I'll explain. Please, not over text. That was the moment I realized something. He wasn't afraid. He thought I'd just walk away. He thought I was weak. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. That evening, I drove back to the house. The lights were on again, dinner on the table, laughter echoing faintly through the open window. I parked 2 blocks away and just watched. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, not in pain, but with cold certainty. Greater than, you bought a house with my money, Daniel. You let your wife and her mother live in it. Then I'll make sure none of you forget who paid for it. I told myself I would be calm. I rehearsed sentences in the car like someone preparing for an interview. Steady voice, factual statements, no screams, no begging. But rehearsals are useless when every memory of him is a hot coal in your palm. I parked 2 houses down so I wouldn't be seen. The air smelled like cut grass and something sweet from a neighbor's barbecue, ordinary sounds that made the scene feel all the more unreal. When I walked up the path, the front door was ajar like an invitation. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. Inside, the living room looked staged, tasteful throw pillows, a vase of fresh flowers, an expensive-sounding scent in the air. Clara glanced up from a catalog, smiled politely, then her face tightened when she saw me. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on a tea towel. For a split second he looked like the man I had once believed in, apologetic, maybe even ashamed. Then he smoothed his expression into something practiced. "Hi," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." They exchanged that look people use when rehearsed for damage control. Clara's smile vanished. Daniel took a step forward. "What are you doing here?" he asked, low, the kind of tone that tries to sound reasonable but smells of accusation. "You bought a house with my money," I said. "I didn't ask. I stated it, as if the words themselves could pull the truth out of the air. You put it in your name. Your wife is living here. Her mother is here. You told me renovation costs, contractors, delays. You lied." Clara folded her arms. "This is getting personal," she said. Her voice was cool, practiced. "Who are you?" "I was the one who wired you $120,000, I said. Silence filled the room like a physical thing. Daniel's face flickered. "That's," he began. "You told me it was for the flip," I continued, ignoring him. "You said you'd pay me back when you sold. You sent me pictures of paint and flooring. I trusted you." Daniel held up a hand. "You gave me a loan," he said. "You weren't an investor. We had an agreement. You weren't even honest about being married." The words cut sharper than I expected. Clara's jaw tightened. Daniel's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "You didn't ask," Daniel said weakly. "You trusted me. I didn't think. I never wanted to hurt you." "It wasn't about asking," I said. "This was my life savings. I don't have that money anymore." Clara's posture softened an inch, and for a moment I thought I might get an apology. Instead, she put a hand on Daniel's shoulder like a shield. "We're sorry you feel that way," she said. "We thought you understood the arrangement." "Arrangement?" I laughed bitterly. "You staged the renovations, your company staged the house. The contractors, the images, everything tied to you. You worked together. I had the records printed, photocopies tucked under my palm, the transfer confirmation, property deed, insurance paperwork with Clara's name. I set them on the coffee table. The paper looked absurdly small against the room's carefully curated softness. Daniel's face drained of color. Clara reached for the papers before he could, but I pulled them closer. "You could have told me you were married," I said. "You could have offered to put my name on the title. Instead you let me hand you everything and then you closed the deal alone." Daniel tried to interrupt. "You're twisting this." "Don't," I said, and there was more steel in my voice than I expected. "I want it explained. Now. Not the half-truths. Not the excuses. How much of it is actually paid? What happened to the money I gave you? Is there a mortgage? Did you use any of my funds to stage the house for a sale? Did you ever plan to pay me back?" He swallowed. Clara's fingers drummed the arm of the couch. For the first time, the polished veneer cracked and something real, fear, guilt, calculation, shone through. "Let's sit down," Clara said. "We can figure this out." Calmly. Calmly, I echoed. "You lived in my house while I paid for it. There's nothing calm about this." Daniel's answer was a whisper. "I can make it right," he said. "Just let me handle it." A laugh escaped me, hurt and raw. "Handle it? You don't get to handle this alone. You get to answer questions. You get to let me see the bank records, the escrow statements, everything." Clara stood suddenly. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "You're harassing us. You think I don't know what harassment looks like." I stood too. "I gave you my life savings. I trusted you. I will not stop until this is cleared up." Daniel stepped between us like a child trying to stop a fight. His tea towel slipped from his hands and fell to the floor like a thrown flag. For a heartbeat I saw him, not the man who'd lied, but the boy who'd always needed someone to bail him out. The sight made my chest ache with even more complicated things. "Fine," he said finally, voice small. "Let's, tomorrow, meet at the bank. We'll go over statements. I'll show you everything." I nodded because the fight was not always loud. Sometimes it was paperwork, signatures, witnesses. "Tomorrow," I repeated. As I left, Clara watched me with something like pity, or perhaps calculation. Daniel closed the door softly behind me. The night air felt colder than it had when I walked in. I didn't cry in the street, I couldn't. I walked back to my car with my head held straight, the copies of bank transfers indeed in my hand like evidence and like armor. I had demanded answers and they had offered a meeting. It wasn't closure. It was the next move on a board I hadn't planned to play. But I was playing now. And when it was over, one way or another, they would remember that I hadn't left without fighting. The next morning, I arrived at the bank 30 minutes early. My stomach was tight, my palms damp. I hadn't slept, not really. I'd spent the whole night reading and rereading my transfer receipts, the messages he'd sent, the photos he'd shared of that investment house. Every word felt poisonous now. When Daniel finally walked in, he wasn't alone. Clara was with him, her hair perfect, her perfume sharp enough to sting. They looked like a couple attending a mortgage consultation, not two people about to be confronted for stealing $120,000. Daniel offered a weak smile. "Thanks for coming," he said. I didn't reply. I just looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I saw what had been there all along, someone who smiled only when it served him. We sat down in a small office with a banker, a woman named Sandra. She clicked through her computer as Daniel handed over a few documents. He'd told her I was an early investor in his business, here to review the transactions. The nerve. When Sandra pulled up his account, I leaned forward. "Can you show all transactions between May and July last year?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing at Daniel. "Mr. Morris, it's fine," he said quickly, forcing a laugh. "Full transparency." The screen filled with numbers, and my heart stopped. There it was, the $120,000 wire. From me, dated May 18th. 2 days later, a cashier's check withdrawal for the exact same amount. The payee line, Sunview Properties LLC. Clara's company. I looked up at her. She didn't flinch. "So, let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You used my money to buy the house, under his name, and your company handled the transaction." Clara folded her hands. "Technically, yes. The LLC facilitated the purchase. It was legal." "Legal," I repeated. "It's fraud, Clara. You can't use someone else's money without consent. You both lied to me." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "It wasn't meant to be like this. The plan was to sell the house, pay you back with profit." "But you didn't sell it," I interrupted. "You moved in. You used my money to build a life with her." The banker shifted uncomfortably. The air in the room was electric, tense, heavy, thick with words no one wanted to say out loud. Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "Please, listen. I can fix this," he whispered. "I'll refinance the house, take a loan, return the money. Just give me time." "How long have you been saying that to people?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Clara looked down at her nails, pretending to be bored, but I saw the flicker of fear in her reflection on the desk's glass surface. Sandra cleared her throat. "If there's a financial dispute here, I'd recommend seeking legal counsel. The transactions are clear, the funds were transferred voluntarily, and ownership of the property is legally recorded." Voluntarily. That word hit hard. Daniel looked at me like a man clinging to a lie that was slipping through his fingers. "You don't need to take this to court," he said softly. "It'll ruin all of us. I'll make it right, I swear." I gathered the printouts Sandra handed me and stood up. My voice was calm, too calm. "You already ruined us, Daniel. I'm just collecting what's left." I walked out before either of them could speak. The moment the door closed behind me, I exhaled, a long, shaking breath that didn't feel like relief but like the first breath before a storm. Outside, the morning sun was bright, but everything looked dull. I knew what I had to do next. It was no longer about heartbreak or betrayal. It was about justice. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Marisol Vega, sharp, efficient, the kind of attorney whose presence filled a room with the quiet certainty that things could, and would, be fixed. When I told her the story in her office, the wire transfer, the deed, the staged photos, she didn't gasp or look shocked. She read the documents I'd brought, flipped through my messages, then nodded. "Good work collecting these," she said. "You did the right thing by coming here instead of confronting them alone." That sentence, small, practical, felt like an anchor. For the first time since the drive-by at the house, I felt a plan forming that didn't rely on anger alone. Marisol filed for a civil suit that week: fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment. She also wrote a demand letter to Daniel and Clara, but warned me we might be looking at more than just a marriage gone bad. People who operate like this often use layers of companies and accounts, she said. We'll need subpoena power to follow the money. A subpoena is a quiet thing on paper but thunderous in action. We served it to Sunview Properties LLC, to Clara Jenkins Morris's staging company, to every bank account Daniel used that showed up in the records. When the replies came back, they opened a bigger hole than I expected. Sunview was a shell. The LLC's registered agent was a third-party service, its only listed address was a mailbox in a business center. The staging company had invoices to contractors that, on paper, matched renovations, but the contractors either didn't exist or were unrelated subcontractors who claimed they'd been paid in cash. A mid-level accountant associated with the transaction had suddenly left the country. Small transfers traced to overseas accounts. Cash withdrawals at casinos. Luxury purchases in people I'd never heard of. I read the reports late into the night, and for the first time the betrayal wasn't only personal, it was systemic. Daniel and Clara weren't sloppy lovers with a single bad decision. They'd set up a mechanism to turn other people's trust into property and profit. I had been one of their marks. Marisol called a meeting with me and her investigator, a man named Lee who smelled faintly of coffee and old books, and who wore his skepticism like a second coat. He'd found other names tied to Sunview's transactions, individuals who had wired smaller sums and then vanished from social feeds. You're not alone, he said. I've tracked 3 other similar cases in the last 18 months. Different cities, same pattern. Hearing it felt like both vindication and violation. I wasn't the only fool, that was a small comfort. But the scale made the stakes larger. If this was a network, then our case could bring down more than one pair of deceitful hands. It could pull at a tangle that might fight back. And they did. The first threat came by text, a message from an unknown number with only one sentence. Drop this, or it gets worse.